Hello. Can you all hear me? All right, let's get started. Welcome to session 3 of Teaching the Bible Cover to Cover. We missed last week because they were having a program where I guess they're sheltering homeless families last week, so we couldn't meet. Next week we won't meet because they're having a Cub Scout meeting here. Now, one Thursday out of every month they have a Cub Scout meeting. It happens to be next Thursday. But after next week, so don't come next Thursday, but after next week we should have at least 3 in a row till the next Cub Scout meeting happens. Okay? Also, I mentioned it last time in case some of you weren't here. I'm videotaping this and I'm putting the videos on YouTube so you can watch it at home if you miss it or if you want to catch up on something, watch it again. The first 2 times I didn't have the microphone right and it was pretty quiet, but I think I got it fixed now so it should sound okay. So from here on out we should be okay. Can't help my face, but I can help the voice. It might be a little louder. All right? So let's get started. Let's start off with prayer. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God, please bless everybody who's here tonight. Thank you for gathering us together tonight to learn your word and to learn the Bible. Please speak through me so that everything that I say is what you want me to say to these people and may be completely accurate from the Bible, and that everything that I say is what you want said. Please make it so that if I do speak your word, that everybody hears it, and please open their hearts so it takes root. And bless everybody on their way home, and may they have a safe night and a safe weekend. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, I'm going to catch up just a little bit. I'm going to do this at the beginning of every session, just a little review of what we went up to this point, so we can pick up where we left off, and nobody's wondering, okay, where are we at? We start off with God created everything in 6 days. He created man and woman, Adam and Eve. They were sinless. They kind of ruled the earth. They had a choice to follow God or follow Satan. They chose to follow Satan and they fell. Because of that, sin entered the world. And from then on out, everybody sinned. There wasn't a person alive that didn't sin. Adam even sinned. They had children, Cain and Abel. Their son Cain killed their other son Abel, and it went downhill from there. It got so bad, people reproduced, and they're here for quite a while, that God actually said in the Bible, in Genesis 6:5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So man got so bad the first time around that there was nothing in his thoughts or behaviors other than just evilness. And he said, we got to start over. This can't continue, But he found one good man named Noah. And Noah, he found favor in Noah. And Noah, I guess, was a good man, so he decided to start over with his offspring. So had Noah load his family into this ark that he had been building for decades, I believe. And God sent all the animals to a pair of male and female of each kind, and Noah loaded them into the ark. God flooded the earth, killed all the evil people, and started over Noah's offspring. Well, Noah got out of the ark and they started to reproduce, and already they started to get rebellious. I guess God commanded the people to spread out and multiply. They all decided to gather in one city and build this tower up to the heavens. And God said, no, this can't happen. You're already starting to do things I shouldn't tell you to do. Everybody spoke the same language, so he decided to scatter other languages. So everybody spoke a different language. Nobody understood each other, and that caused them to spread out, which he wanted them to. And they spread out, and they started filling up the earth. And then we hear about the first big religious, well, I guess they call him almost the founder of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith. I mean, God is the founder. But along came a man named Abraham. And God approached this man named Abraham, and he told him, I'm God, and if you do what I tell you to do, and you follow my ways, I'll make your descendants as numerous as the grains of sand on the seashore. If you could count the stars in the sky, you'd be able to count your descendants. I'll make you a great nation. And he put Abraham to a couple tests. He failed the first one. But the second one, was a more difficult one. God said to him, Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your son, your only son Isaac, to me. And Abraham, sadly, but he said, I will. And he took his son, who had to cooperate, he's older now, he's about 17, and he brought him, and he was about to sacrifice him to God. And God, as he was about to kill him, as God asked him to, God stopped him. God would never ask him to kill somebody like that. And he said, Abraham, stop. Now that I know that you would give your son, your only son to me, I will bless you exceedingly, and I'll make your descendants countless, and I'll make great nations from you. Well, Abraham was happy, of course, and Isaac was pretty happy himself. And Abraham and Isaac had 2 sons, and their names were Esau and Jacob, and they were twins. And they're even fighting in their womb, and Esau and Jacob's mother asked God, why is this so? Why are you fighting in my womb? And God said, because you have 2 nations in your womb that will be at odds with each other. The older will serve the younger, and the younger will be more powerful. Esau came out first, Jacob came out second, grabbing at his heel. And they're at odds with each other all through their life, and through some quarrels and deception, the younger son, he wasn't much younger, they're twins. Jacob got the blessing from his father Isaac before he died. And God said that Jacob would be the one that all the promises would come through his offspring. Well, now Jacob had 12 sons. And actually the name Jacob meant trickster, because he tricked and manipulated his brother Esau and his father throughout when he was a youngster to get all these different things. When he got older, he's actually running from his brother Esau because he tricked him out of his birthright, he tricked him out of his blessing, and his brother was going to kill him. So he ran and he hid with his uncle named Laban. And Laban was 10 times more the trickster than Jacob ever was. And Jacob fell in love with his cousin. Her name was Rachel. And he said to his uncle Laban, I would like to marry Rachel. And he said, well, you can, but you have to work for me for 7 years. And after you work for me for 7 years, I'll allow you to marry my daughter Rachel. And he was happy to do it because he loved her. Well, on the wedding night, Laban trotted out Rachel's older sister Leah. He said, what are you doing? Well, you're going to marry Leah. No, what are you talking about? I'm going to marry Rachel. You know I love Rachel. Oh, yeah, technicality. I have this custom that you have to marry the older daughter first before anyone can marry the younger one. So you can marry Rachel, but you have to marry Leah first. And if you want to marry Rachel, you have to work another 7 years, then you can marry her. Well, he did. So he worked 14 years, and he married Leah first and had 10 sons with Leah. And then he married Rachel second, who he loved more, and had 2 sons with her. And that's where we pick up now with the story of one of Jacob's 12 sons. And these 12 sons will go on to form the 12 tribes of Israel, and his name is Joseph. Okay, in the last session, I mentioned that Jesus, after he rose from the dead, and one of the first people that he met were these 2 guys on the road to Emmaus. And he was disguised. They didn't know it was Jesus. They started talking with him, and they had this conversation. And Jesus told these 2 men from Emmaus, all through the Scripture, it talks about the Savior. If you know what you're looking for, he's all through the Scripture, and it's true. We're going to read a story about Joseph now. And out of anybody in the Old Testament, more things happen in Joseph's life that mirror or foreshadow what would happen in Jesus' life in the future. Okay, I'll show you that as we go through. It's really interesting. So, Jacob had 12 sons, which would be 12 tribes of Israel. He had 10 with Leah, who he did not love, and 2 with her sister Rachel, who he did love. And the 2 that he had, sons that he had with Rachel, he loved more than his other sons because they came from the wife that he loved. We'll talk about family problems, okay? This would definitely be on a TV show now, like Dr. Phil or something. Okay, so Jacob had 12 sons, and their names were Reuben, Simeon, Levi. Oh, by the way, is this volume okay? Too loud, too quiet? Okay. Jacob had 12 sons. Their names were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Now Joseph was the second youngest son of Jacob, and he was born from Rachel. And then there was one more after him. His name was Benjamin, who was also born from Rachel. Jacob loved Joseph the most out of all of his sons because he was the first son from his wife Rachel, the wife that he loved more than his other wife Leah. So Joseph had a favorite son. Does God have a favorite son? God the Father? Yeah? No? Who would it be? Jesus. Okay. Now, that might be kind of vague. Well, it could be anything, but you'll see it gets more specific. So God the Father does have a favorite son, Jesus. Now, the fact that Jacob loved Joseph more than his other brothers bothered him greatly, because not only did Jacob love Joseph openly more than the others, he was also her half-brother. The first 10 came from Leah, and then you had these two half-brothers, Benjamin and Jacob, and Joseph loved them more. So there's a lot of animosity from the older brothers towards the two younger brothers. Now, Jacob made Joseph a robe of many colors, which Joseph wore. He didn't make the other brothers any robes. Okay, so he's clearly, you're special to me, and the other brothers did not like it. Now, when his brothers saw this, that he made him this robe of many colors, they became envious of him, and they hated Joseph. You know, one thing I want to point out, I used the word envious, and I want to kind of make this clear before we kind of get any further, because I heard actually Oprah complaining about this, okay? Oprah said, and I heard other people say, how can you follow a God that's jealous? What kind of God would be jealous of something? That's like, that means, okay. A lot of times the word jealous and envious gets mixed up. Envious means, I wish I had something that you had. I like your shirt, I wish it was mine, right? When you hear the word jealous, think of a jealous husband. What does that mean? I don't want anybody else taking my wife, okay? God is jealous of us. He loves us, we're his children. Imagine this. Imagine, are you all parents here at some point, most of you? Okay, imagine you have children, you raise them up, and at some point they go, you're not my father, you're not my mother, you're not my parents. That guy down the street that I never even really knew, he's my parents, you're not my parents. Would you be jealous? Like, you're my children, I don't want that guy, you abandoned me for, saying that's your father. That's what it means when you hear God is jealous. I just want to bring that up because that gets mixed up a lot, okay? So God is a jealous God. He loves us. He doesn't want us following anybody else as a father but him. So Jacob's brothers weren't jealous, they're envious. And they're envious of him because Joseph favored him. Now this didn't help either. When Joseph was 17 years old, he had two dreams. And these dreams are important because they come into play later. And he told his older brothers the two dreams. Joseph said, hey brothers, I had these two dreams. Let me tell you for you. Behold, we were binding sheaves of wheat in the field, and my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to my sheaf. And they said, are you indeed to reign and rule over us? And then he said, well, I have another dream too. Hey brothers, listen to this. I had a dream that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And both his father and his brothers criticized him for not only for these dreams, but saying, like, who do you think you are, Now, one day, Joseph's older brothers, the 10 older brothers, were watching a flock of sheep in a field far away. And his father Jacob said, hey, Joseph, why don't you go out and see if your brothers need help with anything or if they need anything? So he said, okay, Dad. So his brothers saw Joseph coming from a distance. They were envious of him, and they were now plotting to, when he comes here, we're going to kill him. Now, his oldest brother, Reuben, said, we can't. He's our brother. We can't kill him. But what we should do is put him in his pit until we figure out what to do with him. But we just shouldn't kill him, because that would be wrong. So he said, okay. So they grabbed Joseph, and they took off his robe, his special robe his dad made for him, and they threw him in this pit until they figure out what we're going to do with Joseph. Now, Reuben went away to work in the field with her. He was the one who said, don't kill him. And he went working, and the other 9 were around. And while he was away, a bunch of Ishmaelite slave traders came by. Remember Ishmael? Remember who he was? Okay. So God told God told Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation. Now, Abraham was already 90, and his wife Sarah was 80. And Sarah said, hey, Moses, I don't think God's going to give us any kids through me. I'm 80 years old. Why don't you take my servant Hagar as a second wife and have kids with her, because the heir is not going to come from me. I'm 80. So he said, okay. So he took Hagar and had a boy and named it Ishmael. And later they cast him out. So these are descendants of Ishmael. So Abraham's great-grandsons, followers of him or family of him, who was the illegitimate heir, now were coming by as slave traders, and Joseph's brothers said, let's sell Joseph off as a slave to these guys and get rid of him. So they sold Joseph off for 20 pieces of silver to Ishmaelite slave traders. So the illegitimate, I hate using the word illegitimate, but the son that was not promised from God, his descendants took one of the heirs that was promised from God as a slave. Okay, so you start weaving these tangled webs of not following God. You never know how it's going to play out later on down the road. All right, so Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. Basically, they gave him a death sentence. I mean, you sell somebody to slavery, you don't really expect to ever see them again. Okay? So that was his brothers who betrayed him. Who else was betrayed by somebody really close to him? Jesus. One of the 12. Okay? One of the 12. This is one of the 12. Okay. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. How many pieces of silver did they sell Jesus for? 30. Again, sold for pieces of silver. Okay, so a lot of stuff that's happening in Joseph's life is a foreshadow of what's going to happen in Jesus' life. And again, Joseph did nothing wrong yet. You know, he didn't sin, he didn't commit any crime. Innocent man being punished and being harshly. Who else did that remind you of? So what they did was they sold him off these Ishmaelite slave traders for 20 pieces of silver. They took his robe in many colors that his father Jacob made him because he loved them most. They ripped it up, poured animal blood all over it, brought it home and said, "Oh my God, Dad, we found this. An animal must have just clawed Joseph to death and ate him, and this is all that's left." And Jacob was heartbroken because it was his favorite son, and he thinks he was killed by a wild animal. And that's how they left him to believe. They never told him now that, you know. So he went, basically was going on the rest of his life thinking, my son's dead. So now Joseph was taken by these Ishmaelite slave traders to Egypt as a slave. And he was bought by a man named Potiphar. Now Potiphar was the captain of the Pharaoh's guard, a pretty high up position. Now all through Joseph's life, although he went through tragedies, God was with him and blessed him and had his hand on him. God was with Joseph and blessed everything he did. And as a result, Joseph was successful at everything, all the tasks he did in Potiphar's house, to the point that Potiphar noticed this and said, God must be with this kid. Everything he does works out great. He put Joseph completely in charge of running his house, where he's in charge of everything. You know, the only person above him was Potiphar. Now Joseph was a handsome man, and Potiphar's wife was attracted to him. Day after day, she would walk up to Joseph and say, "Sleep with me." And Joseph responded, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in his house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" But Potiphar's wife kept persisting. Every time she had a chance, she'd grab him and say, "Let's go sleep together." And he would always try to ignore her and get away from her. Well, one day, when no one was in the house except for Joseph and Potiphar's wife grabbed him by his shirt and yelled, "Sleep with me." And he refused because it was wrong and it was a sin. She wouldn't let him go, so he started to fight to get away, and it ripped his shirt off in her hand. Well, she got angry because she was rejected by Joseph. So she went out to the guards and said, "Joseph tried to attack me and force himself on me. I had a fight with him to get away, and I ripped his shirt off in the struggle." And she told her husband Potiphar the same thing. And Joseph was put in jail for it. Who else received a very harsh sentence for being innocent, never sinned, but yet was condemned? Jesus. However, God is with Joseph and blessed everything he did in prison. So he's in prison now for a while. And everything he did was successful. And as a result, Joseph was put in charge of all the prisoners of the prison. Now, while Joseph was in the prison, the cupbearer and the baker were arrested and put in prison. Now, the cupbearer was kind of a high position, but I don't know if he really wanted it. He was a guy that tasted all the Pharaoh's food to make sure it wasn't poison. You know, so every time he got a meal, he'd say, "You eat it and make sure nobody poisoned." So it was important because, I mean, you know, you're the one protecting the Pharaoh, but, you know, every day you're taking a risk if somebody wants to get rid of him. So they were in prison with Joseph, and they were arrested they believed that they stole something from the Pharaoh. And while they're in prison, they both had these disturbing dreams. And Joseph came up and said, "Why do you look so sad?" I don't know. I guess everybody's sad in prison. Maybe Joseph wasn't, but he noticed these guys were exceptionally sad. And they said, "We had these horrible dreams." They said, "Well, tell them to me, and I'll ask God to interpret them, see if we can find out what they mean." So they told him their dreams, and Joseph asked God, and God gave him the meaning. He said, "God told me what your dreams mean." He said, "For you, cupbearer, your dreams mean that in 3 days you're going to be found innocent. You're going to be released from prison and restored to your position, as cupbearer for the Pharaoh. And he said, that's great. And the baker said, what does my dream mean? He said, your dream means in 3 days, baker, you're going to be found guilty of the crime and you're going to be hung and put to death. And that's exactly what happened. So in 3 days, the cupbearer was found innocent, and they released him from prison and restored him to his position. And the baker was hung and put to death. Now the cupbearer was really excited that thank you, Joseph, you told me this was going to happen. It did. I'm so excited. I'm getting out of here. And Joseph said, listen, you're the cupbearer. Speak to the Pharaoh for me. I'm innocent. I'm arrested. I'm put in jail for attacking Potiphar's wife, and I didn't do it. I'm an innocent man. You can get me out of here. Please speak to Pharaoh. Oh, yeah, absolutely, I will. Absolutely. As soon as he got out, he forgot about him for 2 more years. So Joseph's sitting in prison for 2 more years. 2 years later, the Pharaoh had some troublesome dreams. Now, in the first dream, he dreamed that these 7 plump, fat, very healthy cows came walking out of the Nile River and stood on its banks. And right behind them, 7 skinny, sickly, diseased cows came up behind them and ate them. And they were gone, and just the diseased cows were there. And then he had a dream right behind it where 7 healthy, plump ears of corn grew up. And right behind it, 7 years of diseased, blighted, dried up corn grew up and ate it. And there was no more of the good corn, just the bad corn. And the Pharaoh woke up and he was terribly distressed by these. And he asked all the soothsayers and magicians and wise men, could you tell me what this means? And nobody could. Well, the cupbearer is always around Pharaoh. He's a cupbearer. He said, hey, I know a guy. I remember when I was in prison. Remember you sent me to prison, Pharaoh, when I was innocent? Well, when I was in prison, there was a guy named Joseph, and I had these dreams, and the baker had these dreams. And we told him what they were, and he told exactly what they meant and what was going to happen. He might be able to help you. And I know exactly where he's at because he's stuck in prison because I said I'd get him out, but I forgot. But I know where he is because he's stuck there. So Pharaoh said, well, go get him and bring him to me. So they go get Joseph, they clean him up, and they bring him to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh asked Joseph, if I tell you my dreams, could you interpret them? He said, well, I can't, but I believe God can, and I'll ask God, so you tell me. So the Pharaoh told him his dreams. And Joseph said to the Pharaoh, your 2 dreams mean the same thing. The 7 healthy cows got eaten by the 7 sickly cows, and then the 7 healthy ears of corn got eaten by the 7 sickly ears of corn. What's going to happen, Pharaoh, is you're going to have 7 years of abundant crops, followed by 7 years of severe famine where nothing's going to grow. Now, not only God told me this is what they mean, and this is what's going to happen, he also told me what you need to do. He said, during the abundant years, when all these crops are growing, you need to build storehouses, and you need to store 1/5 of all your crops in these storehouses, and don't touch them. And then when the 7 years of famine come and nothing's going to grow, we'll have all this food stored up, and we're going to make it through. It's the only way we're going to make it through. Well, Pharaoh was delighted, and Pharaoh could tell that this dream interpretation came from God. And he said, God is clearly with you, and I think your interpretations are from God, and I think your plans are for God, and I'm putting you second in charge over all of Egypt. There's not going to be anybody above you in Egypt except for me, and everybody in Egypt has to do exactly what you say, because there's nobody above you except for me. So this slave became the right-hand man of Pharaoh, and he never committed a sin. Who never committed a sin after he did what he did is at the right hand of God? Jesus. Now, an interesting thing is, the Bible says all things work for good for those who love the Lord and work according to his purpose. God will take bad situations, and if you love him and follow him, he will work it so that something good comes out of it. All right? I'll get my words mixed up. Joseph was sold as a slave, and he's bought by Potiphar. God is with him. He's successful at everything he did. Potiphar had him then managing his estate. Joseph managed his big, rich estate. Then he got put in prison, and God was with him, and everything he did was successful. He managed the prison. He has experience in managing a rich, wealthy estate and experience managing a hard prison, 2 different extremes. That was his training, because now he's going to manage Egypt. He's going to manage the economy. He's going to manage, kind of part of the government, of the food distribution. And God used these opportunities to train him to run things. He ran the estate, he ran the prison. So on the surface, this is a horrible situation. He was in training. So Joseph was 30 years old when he was placed second in command over Egypt, and Pharaoh's dreams came true just as God told Joseph they would. There were 7 years of plenty during which the Egyptians saved up 1/5 of their crops each year in storehouses. After this came 7 years of famine in which the crops did not grow. Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold the saved food to the people during the famine. He sold this food not only to the Egyptians, but also to neighboring countries hit by the famine. So this famine didn't just hit the countries around it, including the area where his 10 brothers lived and their father who sold into slavery. Now I'm going to paraphrase this. It's kind of how it says in the Bible. Back home with his dad and his 10 brothers, his dad basically said, it's kind of what it says in the Bible, sons, get off your butts. We're starving here. There's no food growing here. What are you doing? We all know that they have food in Egypt. It's the only country that has it. They're selling it to people. Get over there and buy some before we starve to death. Because he's an old man now. So the 10 brothers go into Egypt now to buy food. They don't expect they're going to run into Joseph. I think he's dead or a slave somewhere. Now, when the 10 brothers got to Egypt to buy the food, Joseph was the one in charge of distributing the food, so they had to go directly to him. Now, he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. He looked like an Egyptian now, had his head shaved, had Egyptian makeup, the Egyptian garb, plus he was like a teenager when they sold him to slavery. He's, in his 30s now. Joseph recognized his brothers, and what he did was he called them and started talking to them. Why are you here? We're here to buy food. And he said, I think you're spies. I think you're here to search out our land. You want to attack us. No, we're not. We had him put in prison. And he kept saying, your spies confessed. Well, eventually they broke down and they started saying, this must be punishment for selling our brother Joseph. This is punishment for what we did. We're so sorry. And he scared them for like 3 days. He did a couple things to them, not hurt them, but tricked them and just got them all nervous. And eventually, he sent the guards out of the room. And it was just him and them. And he said, take a look at my face. I'm your brother Joseph, who you sold into slavery. I'm second in command in Egypt right now. I can do anything I want to. And you think they were scared? I would be. They were petrified. They all thought they were dead. Now, Joseph's brothers were sure he was going to kill them or something. But Joseph said, listen, brothers, don't be afraid. God allowed everything to happen the way that it did so I can save people's lives. Although you sold me to slave traders and meant it for bad, God meant it for good. He made everything I did to be successful, and it eventually put me second in charge of Egypt, where I saved up food to survive the famine. I love you, brothers, and do not be afraid of me. So they basically sold him off to a death sentence. And he forgave the people that put a death sentence on him. Who else did that?
Christ.
Yeah. He nailed to the cross and said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. The brothers were overjoyed. They went home and they said, Dad, guess what? Joseph isn't dead. We lied. He's actually second in charge of Egypt. He wants us all to move there. And they all did. And Jake was overjoyed. Oh my God, my son's not only alive, but look how he is. And they moved in, and that's where they settled. They lived the rest of their lives in Egypt. Now, back to two of Joseph's dreams from earlier. When he was a teenager, he told his brothers. He said, brothers, I got 2 dreams. Behold, we were binding sheaves of wheat in the field, and my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said, are you indeed to reign and rule over us? Did he? Yeah. And it was all about food too, crops, Second dream, behold, the sun, the moon, the 11 stars are bowing down to me. Now, one of the ways the Bible describes Israel is the 12 tribes of Israel. They'll call them 12 stars. And he said, the sun, the moon, the 11 stars are bowing down to me. How many brothers did Joseph have? There's 12 total. 11. So he had those dreams years ago, and they came true. So, that's all we got about Joseph. You ready to move into Moses? All right, let me get my kombucha first. I need 2 seconds. Okay, so finally on the book of Genesis. Joseph's story kind of ends Genesis. Genesis is the most information-dense book in the Bible. I mean, it goes from first there was nothing but God, and he said, let there be light, to all the way through the first period of man, they wiped them out, and they started with Noah again, and all the way up through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. There's a lot in there. Now we get into Exodus, second book. So, remember, Joseph and his 12 brothers are now living in Egypt. Okay, these are going to be the future 12 tribes that form Israel. As time passed, Jacob's 12 sons, he's also called Israel now. God changed Jacob's name to Israel. His 12 sons had children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and so on, while living in Egypt. So over time, I mean, they just multiplied exponentially. Many other Israelite people moved to Egypt during the famine because, well, they weren't Israelite people. People from Canaan, there's no food there. Egypt was the only one that had food, so people surrounding, like Jacob and his 12 sons, also moved to Egypt because they had a place to have food. So there became a great many of people called Israelites who were living in Egypt. And we think by the time Moses hit, it was like somewhere around 2 million. Over time, though, a new Pharaoh was in charge of Egypt, and he never heard of Joseph. And he became afraid that, he said, look, we have all these people living in Egypt. They're not Egyptians. They're called Israelites. Somehow they moved here a long time ago because some guy named Joseph, I don't know who he is now, and he was afraid that if Egypt got attacked by a foreign army, they had all these people here who weren't loyal to Egypt because they weren't Egyptians. He was afraid they would turn on Egypt and help an enemy and overthrow the country. So he said, we got to suppress these people or get rid of them. So he instructed the commanders beneath him to turn the Israelite people living there into slaves. And they did. And they treated them really harshly. Now the Israelites were helping to build cities for the Pharaoh as slaves. But the more Pharaoh oppressed them, the more they seemed to reproduce. You know, when you try to keep God's people down through persecution, they flourish for some reason because God's hand is in it. So then Pharaoh said, I got to get tougher with this. He told the midwives who delivered the babies for the Hebrew women, he said, listen, this comes from Pharaoh, so it's law. If a Hebrew woman has a baby boy, you are to kill it at birth. But if it has a girl, you can let it live. And the midwives said, we will, because what are they going to say to Pharaoh? But they didn't do it. They were secretly letting the boys survive. And God blessed them. It says God blessed them for doing this. And say how he blessed them, but he blessed them. So then Pharaoh said, he found out this was happening, he said, okay, I got a new order. Any Hebrew boy that is born is ordered to be thrown into the Nile River to die. But if a Hebrew girl is born, I'll allow her to live. One day, a Hebrew woman gave birth to a boy in Egypt. Now, she tried to hide him because she didn't want her baby to be killed, but he was already about 3 months old now, and she couldn't hide him anymore. He's crying. You hear a baby crying in a house back then, you know. So she didn't know what to do, and she was afraid that they were just going to come and take her baby and throw it in the river and kill it. So she didn't know what to do. So what she did was she put the baby in a basket and put it on the bank of the Nile River. And she sent her daughter, who would be Moses' older sister, she sent her and said, go watch and see what happens to our baby. You know, there's nothing else we can do. They're going to kill him, but put him by the river, watch and see what happens. So they put the baby by the river, and the sister comes down, is watching in the bushes, and Pharaoh's own daughter happened to come down to the river to take a bath. And she saw the baby in the basket, and she knew it was a Hebrew baby. But she felt sorry for it, and she felt compassion for it, and she adopted it as her own son, even though it was a Hebrew baby. Now, what happened was his sister was in the bushes watching this as a Hebrew girl, and his sister came out and said, hey, princess, would you want me to find a nurse for your baby that you just found? She said, well, yeah, I need a nurse. So she went and got Moses' actual mother and brought her to Pharaoh's daughter. And she said, well, I just had a baby a little while ago. I can be a nurse. So she hired her and paid her to be a nurse. Actually, she was a nurse to her own son. So Moses was actually raised by his own mother as like a nanny or a nurse in the Pharaoh's castle or the Pharaoh's temple, or wherever he was, the pyramid. And she named Pharaoh's daughter, named him Moses, which means I drew him out of the water. Now Moses grew into a man, but he knew that he was an Israelite, that he was adopted. Okay, that wasn't hidden from him. And one day, as a man, he saw one of the slave masters, an Egyptian slave master, beating an Israelite man, and he became enraged. And he looked around, and he saw nobody was looking, and he killed the Egyptian slave master and hid him in the sand. Well, somebody saw it, and somebody told Pharaoh about it. And Pharaoh, even though Moses was his adopted grandson, he was still an Israelite. And he let it be known, I'm going to get Moses, I'm going to put him to death for killing an Egyptian. And Moses heard about this, so he fled. And he went to a land called Midian, and he was there for 40 years, hiding out in Midian from Pharaoh. After that, they were looking for him. He got a wife named Zipporah, and they had a son named Gershom. So now the people of Israel are crying out for years and years because they're slaves, and they're crying out to God. And God heard their cry. And he remembered his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he's going to make their nation, he's going to make their offspring a great nation. And they're going to have, so many descendants you can't be able to count them. And he decided to help. And he decided he's going to help using Moses. So one day Moses was tending a flock of his father-in-law Jethro in the land of Midian. And God appeared to Moses in the form of this bush. He saw this bush off in the distance on fire, and it looked weird to him. So he went up to see it. And he saw this bush was burning, but it wasn't being consumed. It was just constantly on fire, but it wasn't burning up. And God spoke to him. He said, "Take your shoes off, Moses, for this is holy." And he did. And God said to Moses that God has seen the affliction of his people in Egypt, and he heard the cry due to the suffering from their Egyptian taskmasters. And he said to Moses that he's going to use you, Moses. I'm going to send you to the Pharaoh of Egypt, and you're going to bring the Hebrews out of Egypt into a land flowing with milk and honey, then I'm going to show you where it is. Now Moses was afraid. Moses didn't want to do it. He was scared. First of all, he spent the last 40 years hiding from Pharaoh because Pharaoh wanted to kill him. You're going to send me to him and say, let everybody go? So he didn't want to do it. He was afraid. But, and he also said, and this is important too, he said, if I come to the people, the Israelites, and I say to them, the God of our fathers sent me to you to free all of us. And they asked me, well, what's God's name? What am I to say to him? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. That's important. Because that name I am is what Jesus used. And it's what the Pharisees used to sentence him to death. Okay? Because they said, you're calling yourself God. Let me read that. So this is John chapter 8, 48 to 58. This is way in the future. This is Jesus talking with the religious leaders at the time. They're arguing. Jesus was arguing and saying, you're from your father who's the devil. And they're saying, no, you're possessed because you're saying you're God. And the Jews answered and said to Jesus, are we not right in saying you are a Samaritan and possessed? Jesus answered, I am not possessed. I honor my Father, but you dishonor me. I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is one who judges. Amen, amen, I say to you, whoever keeps my word will never see death. The Jews said to him, now we are sure you are possessed. Abraham died, as did the prophets. Yet you say, whoever keeps my word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham who died, or the prophets who died? Who do you make yourself out to be? Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is worth nothing. But it is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. You do not know him, but I know him. And if I should say that I do not know him, I would be like you, a liar. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Abraham your father rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and he was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham? And Jesus said to them, amen, amen, I say to you, before Abraham came to be, I am. And the Jews picked up the stones to stone him, but Jesus was able to get away from them. Okay? So, right here, Moses says to God, if I come to Jewish people and say, God sent me, what am I going to say your name is? And he said, I am who I am. Say to the people, I am sent you. Jesus said that later. I am, and that's what they used to kill him, okay? Because they said, you're saying you're God, that's blasphemy. He is God. It's not blasphemy, it's the truth. We doing okay so far? Okay. Moses was afraid that the Israelites in Egypt would not believe God sent him to set them free. So God gave Moses the ability to do miracles in front of the Israelites to prove that God sent him. Moses then said to God that I speak poorly, it's some kind of speech impediment. How can I talk to Pharaoh? God said, who is it that makes everybody's mouth? Is it not I? If you have a problem in your mouth, I will fix it. And if you're still afraid, take your brother Aaron. He's a great speaker. He can speak for you if you like, if you don't want to speak. So Moses eventually agreed. Now it's Exodus chapter 4. So Moses returned to Egypt with his family, and he went to the Pharaoh and told him that God said, Pharaoh needs to let the Israelites go for 3 days to worship God in the wilderness. Pharaoh got angry, of course, and he asked, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. And he said, not only will I not let Israelites go to worship God, but he gave them harder work to do. What happened was, up until now, the Israelites are slaves, and they would build buildings and stuff, and they would build bricks to build whatever buildings, okay? And the way it worked was, the slave masters would bring the Israelites straw, and the Israelites mixed the straw with mud or however they made it, and they made bricks. Well, the Pharaoh said, you guys must have a lot of free time on your hands if you want to leave for 3 days and go to worship because your God said to. So you must be too idle. You probably have too much time. So, from now on, the slave master is no longer going to bring you straw to make your bricks. You have to go get your own straw. However, you can't make 1 brick less. The quota has to remain the same. Even the slave masters started freaking out, and they said, Pharaoh, because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, because the quota was going to go down now. Because how could they, they're already treating them like slaves, working like dogs, and they gave them all the materials. Now they got to find their own. And the slave master said, Pharaoh, how could the quota remain the same? We give them all their stuff. You're saying they got to go out and find it now, but yet still the amount has to be the same? And he said, yeah, the amount has to be the same. I'm holding everybody responsible. So the slave masters came up yelling at Moses. The Israelites kept yelling at Moses. Moses went and yelled at God. God, what did you do? You told me to go to Pharaoh and say, set my people free, let the people go for 3 days to worship. You made everything so much worse. But God said to Moses, Moses, you will now see what I will do to Pharaoh for being harsh to the Israelites. He told Moses to tell the Israelites that God will set them free from being slaves to the Egyptians. He will give them their own land, and he will be their God. Now Moses was 80 years old, and his brother Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. God said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell the Pharaoh to let the people go out of his land. So Moses went with his brother Aaron to the Pharaoh and said, God said, let my people go. Pharaoh refused. Moses had a staff in his hand, threw his staff in the ground and became a snake. Pharaoh had all these magicians that practiced the dark arts. They threw their staffs in the ground, they became snakes. He said, I'm not impressed. Pharaoh's snake ate all of the magician snakes. Pharaoh said, nice trick. Pretty cool trick, actually, but I'm still not letting the people go. So Moses said to the Pharaoh, I'm going to come back again and demand in the name of God you let the Israelites go. Every time you say no, a plague is going to be sent on the Egyptian people and on you until you finally let them go. First time, he went to Pharaoh and said, let the people go. Pharaoh said no. Moses turned the water of the Nile into blood. All the fish died and everything stunk. Moses' magicians could do it too. Moses came back and said, second time, and said, let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. And God had Moses send a plague of frogs into the land of Egypt. They're in Egypt. They weren't bothering the Israelites. They're in all the Egyptians' houses. They're everywhere. They're driving crazy. But the magicians could do it too. Third time, Moses came up and said, let my people go. Pharaoh said no. God had Moses send a plague of gnats, like little flies, floating around people, driving them crazy. But from this point on, the magicians couldn't do any of these other things that Moses did. Now, each time he would send a plague, it would eventually bother Pharaoh to the point where he'd say, okay, I'll let him go. Just stop the plague, or let him go. So Moses would have God, through Moses, stop the plague. And very shortly Moses got, I changed my mind, you can't go. Okay, so now he sent gnats all over the Egyptians. The fourth time Pharaoh said no, God sent a plague of flies all over the Egyptians. Nothing's bothering the Israelites. Fifth time Pharaoh said no. All the livestock the Egyptians died, cows, camels, horses, but the Israelites' livestock was okay. Sixth time Pharaoh said no, God sent a plague of boils and sores all over the skin of the Egyptian people. The Israelites are okay. Now, the magicians who were doing some of the tricks earlier were coming to Pharaoh and saying, please let them go. We can't take these plagues anymore. Please, just let them go. And each time, the Pharaoh would get upset and say, okay, Moses, stop the plague, I'll let them go. He'd stop it, and he'd change his mind. Seventh time, Pharaoh said no. God had Moses send huge hail on to Egypt that killed anything that was outside. Eighth time Pharaoh said no. God sent a plague of locusts all over Egypt, but they didn't bother the Israelites. And ninth time Pharaoh said no. God, through Moses, sent a plague of darkness. They said it was so dark you could taste it. People couldn't see their hand in front of their face, but the Israelites had light in their house. Now, in the Bible, you probably wondering, why did Pharaoh keep saying no? God made him say no. He hardened his heart, and this is what it says. God said to Moses, on your return to Egypt, see you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. Why would God do that? Because every time Pharaoh said no, it caused God to cause another plague, another miracle. The flies and the frogs. The Israelites are watching all this. Okay, so the Israelites saw God do 9 plagues. Okay, they're going to see another one, and they're going to see other things. And that's important, because you're going to see how hard the Israelites' hearts were, not the Pharaoh's. Despite all these miracles God caused, you'll see how quickly the Israelites abandoned God and turned their back on him, despite what they've seen God do right in front of their face. And he did this not because he wanted to punish the Egyptians with all these plagues. He wanted to show the Israelites all these miracles that he could do, and they still turn on him. Okay. The final plague, now we did 9 plagues. The final plague was the worst one, called the Passover. God had Moses tell Pharaoh that if he doesn't let the Israelites go on this 10th time, God would kill the firstborn child and animal of everyone in Egypt. Pharaoh said, I'm not going to let them go. So God told each Israelite family to kill a lamb, because they all had lambs back then, and take its blood, and each Israelite family is supposed to paint lamb's blood over the doorposts of their house. And when God would come to kill the firstborn animal or person in a house, when he saw the house with the lamb's blood over the door, he would pass over that house. That's what I call Passover, and not kill the firstborn in that house. And he said, the reason why I'm doing this, one reason is, Israel's my firstborn child, Pharaoh, and you're not letting him go. So that's what the Israelites did. They each family killed a lamb, put blood over the door, and God came through Egypt, and every house, which was the Egyptian houses, they didn't do it, that did not have the lamb's blood on the door, he killed the firstborn son, the firstborn male. Okay? That's a foreshadow of what's to come. Okay? Who's the Lamb of God? Christ. Jesus, right? Jesus shed his blood for us. If we accept him as God and accept he shed his blood for us, through his blood, God will pass his condemnation over us because he unleashes wrath on his son in our place. So if we accept the blood of the Lamb of God and accept him as God, he will not condemn us to death. This is a foreshadow of that. Okay? And he did it with the Israelites. And even the Pharaoh's firstborn son was killed in this. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. And Israelites had lamb's blood over their doorposts, so their firstborn children and animals were spared. The Egyptians were so upset, Pharaoh finally said, go. I'm not going to hold you back this time. Not only am I not going to hold you back, all the people were giving gold and silver and gifts and saying, just please get out of here, So they left with all these riches. However, a couple days later, Pharaoh goes, I just let 2 million slaves go. He changed his mind and went after him with the army. So he had his army a few days behind, eventually caught up with the Israelites, and they had the Israelites now pinned in. You're all the army. If you all went over here on all sides, and to their back was the Red Sea. So God told Moses, raise your hands up. And he raised his hands up, and the Red Sea parted all the way down to the seafloor. And he told the Israelites, Moses, have the Israelites walk down the dry seafloor to the other side. So they did. And shortly after them, the Egyptian army came following. And after the Israelites got over, the Egyptian armies all in this divided sea of big walls of sea on both sides. And God said, Moses, raise your hands again. And he did. And the water came crashing down and drowned all the Egyptian army that came after them. And it saved the Israelites. So finally, God saved the Israelites from being slaves of the Egyptians. He moved them out of Egypt after being slaves for 430 years. That's prophesied. In Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 16, when God came to Abraham before he had any children, and he said, if you do what I say, I'll make a great nation out of you. Your descendants will be as numerous as the sands of the seashore. And Abraham followed him before he had any kids. God said to Abraham, the Lord said to Abraham, know for certain that your descendants will reside as aliens in a land not their own, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on a nation they must serve. And after this, they will go out with great wealth. That's exactly what happened. It's prophesied to Abraham 400 whatever years earlier. Okay, so now the Israelites are out of Egypt and they're kind of standing around. There's like 2 million of them. And they're waiting for God to show them, where are we going to go now? They got hungry, so God would rain this snowflake bread down. It said it tastes like honey. It's called manna. That would rain down every day, 6 days a week, but not on Sunday. They said, collect it. What did they say? Don't collect it every night because you'll get new ones every day. But on Saturday night, you can collect it because it's not going to come on Sunday, whenever their Sabbath was. And that was to trust God. We don't need to collect it because we trust it's going to come down the next day. But he doesn't want them gathering on the Sabbath, so that day he could. If they did collect it, try to save it up, it would turn to worms. But on the Sabbath, if they collected and saved it up, it was fine. So they had manna coming down in the day. They said, well, we want meat now. We're getting tired of this bread. Okay, so God had quail fly down every night into their camp. They would kill and cook it. And they had it so that whenever they were thirsty, Moses would take his stick and whack this rock and water would come gushing out of it. And they would get what they wanted to drink. And we only got 5 minutes, so we'll be done in time. So God then said to Moses, come up to the top of Mount Sinai. I got something for you to do. And he called them up, and that's when he gave them the 10 Commandments. God wrote personally the 10 Commandments on 2 slabs of stone with his own finger. And there are 10 rules that God insists that we follow. That's why they're called commandments. And they are, I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. 2, you shall not make or worship the carved image. 3, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain. 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 5, honor your father and mother, and you'll have a long life. 6, you shall not murder. 7, you shall not commit adultery. 8, you shall not steal. 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. God then gave the Hebrews a collection of rules and laws that said what he did and not want them to do, and this is called the law. God also told the Israelites where he's going to have them settle down and live, which would be the land of Canaan. God told them to make an ark, which is a very fancy box, and this is where they're going to put the 10 Commandments in and carry them around. And that's Exodus chapters 20 to 30. Okay, remember I said, well, why did God make Pharaoh's heart hard, where he had to keep saying no, and then this tragedy would happen, and no, and another plague, and no, and another plague? So God calls Moses up to give him the 10 Commandments. He's not up there long. I think 40 days. While he's up there, the people come to Moses' brother Aaron and says, "Why is Moses taking so long? Maybe something bad happened. Maybe he won't come back. Aaron, we want you to make us new gods that we can follow." So Aaron said, "Okay." So he said, "All of you, give me all your gold that you have." Now they had a lot because the Egyptians loaded them up when they kicked them out because they wanted to get rid of them. He took all their gold and he melted it down and melted this golden calf, and they started worshiping it. And they not only did they say this golden calf is a god, but this golden calf is who got us out of Egypt and did all his miracles. How much did they see? Just like a month ago, all these miracles, and then the parting of the Red Sea, and they got manna coming down, they got quail coming down, and Moses hits a rock, and that quickly, they turn and say, "I don't know where God's at, let's forget him, let's get a new one," and they make the statue. Now meanwhile, God was up on Mount Sinai with Moses, and he told Moses what the Israelites were doing. And God asked Moses if he wanted him to wipe out all the Israelites because they were so bad and start over with a new nation strictly from Moses' descendants. And Moses said no. God knew what Moses was going to say. Moses said no. And God listened to him because the Bible says they were friends. They had a relationship. And Moses said don't. There's a lot of times when Moses say something to God and God would go, "Okay, if that's what you want, Moses." It was really neat. But Moses came down the mountain. He's furious at the Israelites. He smashed the 2 stone tablets with the 10 commandments. He commanded them to melt the golden calf, and he melted it and he poured it into water and made them all drink it. And he asked, "Who's on the side of God?" And all the sons from the tribe of Levi stepped forward and said, "We're on the side of God." And Moses had them kill 3,000 people in the group that rejected God and instead chose to make a golden calf as a god to follow. Now, because of the loyalty by the tribe of Levi, God used this is one of the reasons why God uses later to choose members of only the tribe of Levi to be the priests later for the nation of Israel. Later in Israel's history, all the priests, you had to be a Levite to be a priest. You had to be from this tribe, and this is one of the reasons why. Because they were the ones, they didn't follow the golden calf and actually killed the people that did because God commanded them to. He said, "You're loyal, you're going to be my priests." God also sent a plague to the people who rejected God and followed the golden calf that they made as their God. Okay, so this happened, but still Moses is out there with these, like 2 million Israelites. And Moses built this tent. And it was neat. In the day, God would hover above the crowd as this cloud. And Moses would go in the tent, and the cloud would go in the tent. And then it appears God, and they'd talk however long he was in there. At night, God was a ball of fire. And he'd float around the thing, and Moses would go in the tent, and this ball of fire would follow him in the tent. And they would talk. The first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, were written by Moses. It was easy for him to do. He met with God face to face every day. God would come in and talk to him. And he'd say, write this, And then Moses, God went back to the mountain and made new copies of the 10 Commandments he broke out of his anger. All right, that's it for today. And when we meet next time, we're going to read some of the laws that God gave us in the law. And you'll see that all these things that God says don't do, the people will later do. That's why he said don't do it. And they're going to do it head over heels, a lot of these things. And we'll just move forward. Okay, what I can do is we'll close it up. If anybody wants to ask me a question privately, I'll be up here. If anybody wants to ask me a question that you want to hear the whole, or you want me to answer from the group, that's fine too. But you're free to leave, you're free to stay, whatever you want. And thank you for coming. Remember, we're not meeting next week. Okay, next week is Cub Scout meeting. If you want to come join the Cub Scouts, that's cool. Okay? I won't be here. Please tell anybody, because Monsignor told me, yeah, we didn't have it last week, but a whole bunch of, like, 3 people showed up, so like, where's Michael Kotch? I'm like, well, I don't know. So if you know anybody who normally comes that isn't here, say we're not meeting next week, but we will the week after. And I'll send out announcements. And again, this stuff's good. Wait till we get into Jesus. Oh, does it get really good when we get into him? Okay? All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. God bless. I have a copy. Yeah, I have a copy.
Nice to meet you, Deborah. How are you?
I have a question.
Yeah.
My son is 26, and he's been answering all my questions.
Yeah.
And he said it'd be a lot easier if I knew what you guys, what the discussion was. So I told him it was a YouTube video. All right. And I couldn't find it. If I gave him my email, he can follow along too as well.
Sure.
You know, he's read the Bible like 100 times. His Bible,
Oh my God.
he took from me because I was going to bring it the first night.
Yeah.
Because it had all the tags and all the things, questions, you know, it kind of contradicted each other, and so I couldn't. That was when he was in high school, and I couldn't answer it. I didn't know how to answer it, so it just stayed with the bookmarks. And he took it from me because he didn't bother you with all that. But he said he would follow along on the video if he could.
Yeah.
He couldn't find it. He tried.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
He tried. If I give you my email address, can you send me a link?
Sure.
And he can follow too. Matter of fact, he's at his friend's house right now, and they're waiting for all my questions.
I'll tell you what. You're on the phone? Yeah, you could just text me like your email address. I'll give you my number.